Discontentment in many of our experiences has been a negative thing. Our discontentment has driven us to purchase things we shouldn't purchase. But discontentment can actually be leveraged for good things. In fact, the civil rights movement was the result of a group of people saying, we are discontent, we're dissatisfied with the way that racism is handled in this country, we want to do something about it. There have been many organizations and movements that were birthed because a group of people were discontent with poverty in a nation, discontent with the rise of AIDS in a nation, discontent with homelessness. Many of you have made changes in your life, in your marriage, in the way that you look and the way that you eat because you became dissatisfied with your health, dissatisfied with your marriage, dissatisfied with your grades. And you woke up one day and you said, I'm not living this way anymore. I am discontent with my lack of progress. I'm going to make changes. Here's what I would hope would happen. Here's what I hope would happen today as a result of this message. I think it would be awesome if every single one of us in that area where stuff drives us, whether it's I got to have more clothes, I got to go to the mall, got to upgrade my camera, my computer, my car, my house, my fixtures, my sink, my refrigerator, my warming drawer. Don't even have a warming drawer. Andy, there's warming drawers? I didn't even know that. Now maybe I didn't need to get a warming drawer. Whatever it is, wouldn't it be great is if as a group of churches, we could just decide enough of that. We will not be driven to make bad financial decisions just because of stuff we don't have. We're going to become discontent with our dissatisfaction around stuff that drives us to bigger, better. Wouldn't that be amazing? Now, listen to these verses with all that in mind. We're jumping in right in the middle of a conversation. Two of the concepts here, this is kind of cool. Two of the concepts in these verses you've heard before, and you may not have known that they actually came from the Bible, written 2,000 years ago, but here they are. 1 Timothy chapter 6, we're going to begin with verse 6. Here we go. Paul writes, but godliness with contentment, there's our word, is great gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Now, great gain is in contrast to the way that most of us measure great gain. Great gain is I got rid of all of these and replaced them with flat screens. Great gain is my 401k is so fat, I can live till I'm 120. That's great gain. Great gain is bigger house, bigger car, nicer, better, upgraded, cooler, granite, bigger. Great gain for us is all about stuff. Paul says, I want you to pause for just a minute, and I'd like to redefine that. Great gain in this life is godliness, which means surrendering your life to God and becoming what God wants you to become, doing what God wants you to do, that's godliness, combined with contentment, that I'm fine with what I have. I'm content. I'm fine with what I have. I like yours. It's cool. It's newer. It's shinier. But I'm content with what I have. Paul says great gain is more than stuff. Great gain is godliness combined with contentment. Now, here's why that makes sense, and can't really argue with this. If great gain and enriching yourself and enriching myself, if great gain is only about stuff, that means when we die, we've gained nothing. If great gain is just about stuff, then when we die and leave it all here, that means we had no gain because we didn't send anything on ahead. We didn't do anything of any real value other than just acquire stuff. And so he explains that in verse 7. And whenever you see a 4 at the beginning of a verse, it means it's going to explain what came before. So he explains this. 4, we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. The reason great gain has more to do with your relationship with God and your contentment with what you have is because you're going to leave everything here anyway. Now, we already know that. So he says, I want you to begin rethinking stuff. I want you to begin rethinking the acquisition and the pursuit of stuff. Verse 8, here's a challenge. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. But if we have food and clothing, in other words, if we're eating and living indoors, you know what? We will be content with that. Now, when I read that verse, but if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that, there's something in you and there's something in me that says, nope, we won't. I'm not content just to have enough to eat and something to wear and a place to sleep. I can't really be content with that. There's something in me that's so much about progress and next and better and keep up with and awareness. I don't know that I could ever, now follow me, I don't know that I could ever be content with just enough to eat and something to wear. Now here's something interesting. In lesson 5 in your workbook, the Balanced workbook, when we got to that lesson in my community group, I was teaching that night. And as I prepared, I said, before we look into the workbook, I want to ask everybody in our group to answer this question. And here's the question I ask our group. You could do this when you get to lesson 5 in your book. In our group, there's 6 couples. Most of them are about our age, Sandra and I's age, and everybody has teenagers, or one couple has younger, one has college students, so about same stage of life. And I asked this question, and you think about this. I said, before we begin the lesson, I want you to think back. When were you the most content in your life? When did you feel the least amount of pressure to keep up with? When did you have the least amount of pressure to purchase and move up? When as a couple were you the most content? Now, if the acquisition of stuff fulfills us and makes us content, the answer should have been in our group right now. Because everybody in our group has more stuff than we've ever had before. But the way they answered the question is the way that you would probably answer the question if you were given time to think about it. Everybody in our group, now we got more stuff. We're all living in bigger houses than when we first got married, better cars than we first got married, more stuff, got all this stuff. Everybody in our group, including us, said the time when we were the most content, was when we had the least amount of stuff. And one by one, everybody in the group talked about when we first got married, we had this little itty-bitty house or this little condo, and, we had one car, and we all said, we didn't even think about bigger, better, more upgrade. It just wasn't a part of our thinking. We had less stuff and more contentment. Paul says, duh. That's the way God made the world to work. And the more you fed that appetite of bigger, better, more, your appetite got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was never fully and finally satisfied. So Paul says, you know what I've learned? Paul says, I'm taking it to the extreme. I've learned this to the point that as long as I'm cool with God and I have a clear conscience with God, and as long as I'm doing the best I can to do God's will in my life, if I have that and I got enough food and something to wear, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm way more content than people who have way more stuff. Now, that's a pretty profound thought, isn't it? Let's keep going. You got to read the Bible. It's good. Verse 9. Those who want to get rich, and the little phrase get rich means live richly. That would be all of us. Not are rich, those who want to live richly, drive better, live better, eat better, vacation better, dress better, go to school better. Those of us, he says, those who want to live richly, that is, just more, bigger, better, got to move forward. Those who want to live richly, look at this, fall into temptation and a trap. Now, this isn't, it might happen. This is, it will happen. Think about this. Those who want to live richly, I want to advance my lifestyle and live richer. He says, eventually, they fall into a trap. Everybody here with a credit card balance you can't pay, you fell into that trap. You wanted to live richer. All of those in America who've got a mortgage payment they can't pay, not because of loss of income, but because they just made a bad decision. They wanted to live richly. Hey, nothing wrong with that. But Paul says when that's the driving motivator in your life as it relates to finances, eventually you'll step into a trap. Some people are trapped in leases. They hate the car because they hate the lease. But boy, they stepped into the trap because if with just a couple $100 more a month, they could drive something that's just awesome. And they stepped into that trap because they wanted to live richly. Now, one of the things that surprises me, it surprises you, is when you hear the stories. I think we mentioned this a couple weeks ago. Hear the stories on the news of people who have millions and millions and millions of dollars filing for bankruptcy. You think, how could anyone waste or go through that much money? It's real easy. Because this is a promise. This isn't a suggestion. This is if your orientation in life is toward more, eventually you step into a trap. He goes on, and middle of verse 9, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. Now here's his point. I'm going to ask you to repeat this after me. Discontentment. It's dangerous. Say it with me. Discontentment is dangerous. Discontentment is dangerous. That if we allow this appetite in us that is in all of us to drive us, eventually we step into a trap. It is dangerous. It's dangerous if you're poor, if you're middle class, if you're upper middle class, or you're filthy rich. Eventually there is a trap if our orientation is toward, I've just got to live richly and I've got to live more richly. If that's all there is, he says, eventually you step into a trap. And the thing that fuels that is awareness, and the thing that fuels our awareness is this gnawing sense that I'm dissatisfied with what I have. And then he says something else you've heard before. Verse 10, for the love of money. For the love of money. Now, if I were to ask you one-on-one, or if you would ask me one-on-one, hey, do you love money? We would say, I like it. I don't think I'm in love with it, but we're dating. I'm not in love with money, but we're infatuated. It's hard to see love of money in the mirror. But let me tell you exactly what this verse means. And here's how you know, because he's about to say something about people who are in love with money. The love of money is about to give you a big thought. But when you read the love of money, you think, well, I don't love money. But let me give you an illustration. Remember when you fell in love with the person that maybe you eventually married, or remember the first time you felt like crazy in love, or maybe you're crazy in love now, or there's just, remember some of the stupid things we did when we were in love? Things you look back on and you laugh, You climbed up in a tree and held a poster outside her dorm, and it was lightning and thundering, and she was at home. She wouldn't even, or you drove across, you drove like 100 miles to be with him or with her for 15 minutes, and then you drove home. But it was just, you just look back at the crazy things and you go, wow, some of you got in trouble or you wasted money or, but you were so in love. You did things that don't make any sense, and the only reason you did them was because you were in love. And those are kind of fun stories. Let me flip it around. Don't raise your hand. Can you think of some dumb things you've done in your life financially in order to get something? Can you think about how long it took you to figure out how you could justify moving, or justify a lease, or justify a trade-in, or justify a television? You spent so many minutes and pencils and websites, and you just gave a lot of energy to getting something, and now looking back, you go, that was a stupid purchase. That's you. You were in love with something. You were so in love with a thing and getting a thing, trading a thing, that you hurt someone's feelings. You jeopardized your own financial future, and you look back and go, that was so stupid. Why did I do it? It's because you were in love with money. You were in love with a thing. You were in love with a car. You were in love with a wheel. You were in love with a computer. You fell in love with it. You go, oh, I didn't love it. Yes, you did. You jeopardized things and sacrificed things that you know are more important than the thing for the thing. That's how you know when you are in love with something. Now, I'm not blaming you. Welcome to America. It's our culture. It is our way to fall in love with stuff. But look at the rest of the verse. Verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. When you fall in love with stuff and gotta have it, and I'm gonna do stupid things to get it, he says, you have stepped into the trap. You have set yourself up for evil. That's why marriages fall apart over this kind of stuff. That's why businesses fall apart of this stuff. Some of you have bosses that are making some of the dumbest financial decisions, all for the sake of image, all for the sake of the right furniture. Your business is in trouble, and he's got a new car. Your business is in trouble. He's decided we're going to move or relocate, and you're thinking, what is up with him or her? What are they thinking? And they're making terrible financial decisions, but something's driving that. Dissatisfaction with where they are. Dissatisfaction with what people might think. It's the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, look at the extreme. Some people are eager. Eager. You ever been eager for something? Eager for a thing? Eager for a buyout? Eager for a trade-in? Some people eager for money or stuff have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. You know what his point is? You don't get a handle on your discontentment. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It not only will wreck your relationships, it has the potential to wreck your relationship with God. Some of you, you're back in church. You haven't been in church in a long, long time. And when you look back and trace your drift, it had nothing to do with theology. It had nothing to do with philosophy. You just got distracted by life and progress and things. And now you're back, and you realize there wasn't such great gain to be had there. That was predicted of you 2,000 years ago. It is the nature of falling in love with stuff and the acquisition of stuff. Verse 11, here's the big contrast. But you, in other words, it didn't have to be this way. There's another way. And now this is so brilliant. Paul gives us the preeminent insight into how to work your way out of that and to leverage dissatisfaction for your own benefit, to leverage discontentment for your benefit, to work your way out of this, to change your awareness. But you, man of God, what's the word? Come on, what is it? Flee. Not flirt with, not be careful. Well, I'm being careful. You don't get in the cage with a lion and say, well, I'm going to be careful. You don't reach down to pick up a poisonous snake and say, I'll be careful. There are things that being careful isn't the issue. It's flee is the issue. And he says when it comes to discontentment, when it comes to falling in love with stuff, when it comes to chasing the bigger, better, no matter how much money you have, it is so dangerous. You need to flee. He says, oh man of God, flee from all of this and pursue. See that word pursue? This is the key. He said, I want you to change your direction. I want you to change your pursuit. I want you to become less aware of something and more aware of something else. And pursue righteousness. Pursue godliness. Pursue faith. Pursue love. Pursue endurance and gentleness. In other words, what if you took some of that time you spend drifting down the mall and do something else with it? What if you take that time that you spend surfing the internet for the right thing to see when they're going to come out with and you did something with it? What if instead of drifting through the car lot, you did something else with that time? What if you took your time and said, you know what? Instead of being so dissatisfied with how I live, where I live, and my standard of living, I would like to become more discontent with my lack of knowledge of Scripture. The fact that I don't have intimacy with God. The fact that I've pulled my family out of church for the pursuit of these things. He says, what if you begin to pursue something different? Because in your pursuit of something different, you will become aware of things you haven't been aware of, and that awareness will help you harness your discontentment as it relates to your pursuit of stuff. Verse 18, skipping down for the sake of time. Verse 18, here's the practical application. He says, here's what I'd like you to begin pursuing. Here's what I'd like you to do with some discretionary time and dollars. Verse 18, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds. Go volunteer somewhere. Stay out of the mall and go volunteer. You know, stay away from those places that just suck up your money and make you discontent. Go do something else with that time. To be generous. In other words, instead of spending it, giving it. You figured out, wow, for $200 more a month, look what I can drive. God says, I got an idea. Now that you figured out it's only $200, why don't you give it? Why don't you go find some people in need and give your $200? Redirect your pursuit. Redirect your passion. Become aware of things you're not aware of. And as your awareness changes, guess what? Your dissatisfaction and your discontentment will change as well. Be generous and willing to share. The problem with buying new things is that we're less likely to share them. Maybe this is just me. I don't mind you borrowing my used and beat up stuff. But when I get something brand new, I don't know. Hello, right? He says, I want you to be willing to share. Verse 19, in this way, talking to us, in this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may, this is awesome, so that they may take hold of life that is, what's that word? Come on, what is it? That is truly life. He says, look, if you just go with the flow of culture, you're going to take hold of something you think is life, you've been told is life, they've sold you as life. It's not life. It's just like grains of sand. And at the end of your life, you have gained nothing because you leave it all behind. You spend all your extra time, all your extra energy, all your extra money pursuing things that over time, they're valueless. He says, but if you will become aware of something different, if you will change your pursuit, if you'll change some habits, this awareness thing can change your sense of discontentment, can redirect what you are discontent about. And you'll come to the place where you realize, you know what? The less I have, the more content I am. The more I give my time and my extra to others, the more content I become with what I have, and the less disturbed I am about what I don't have. That they may take hold of life that is truly life.